thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations on the new record.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations on a lot of things, actually. I mean, the new record, which is brilliant, we're going to get to. Also, what seems to be a very, very big sold-out tour.
Yeah. Well, you don't know to expect that, do you? You know, because you can go out plenty of times and sort of like it's sparse. And so you sort of like, you know, you cut your cloth, you do, you know, average size venues, and then it just goes bonkers and all goes off in a couple of days. So, I don't know what to predict.
Why do you think this one has been particularly? Because it's sold out in like 35 minutes or something crazy, didn't it?
Genuinely, I've no idea. You know, it's like I'm so out of the industry.
Yeah.
I have no idea what triggers it.
Because you've got a proper trade now, haven't you? Because that's another thing to congratulate you on now that you're a fine art printmaker.
Well, yeah, I'm graduated as one. Although, you know, the minute I came out of, I graduated, I went straight into having to write and record. You know. So I've not actually done any printmaking since I left college.
Well, because this is an incredibly tenuous little link between you two.
Yes, I can see it coming.
Yeah, because your dad was a printer.
Yeah, he was. I come from quite a long line of lithographers, and this was kind of one of the things that when I left school at 16, you know, I'd said to my dad, you know, I quite fancy going in the print because I really grew up with a lot of, you know, fine art around me. You know, in this council house, we had the most ridiculous prints because I used to work at the Cohen Studios, which was quite a renowned fine art printmaker and a printing press, you know. So I said to him, I'd like to go into the print. He goes, "No, Ella," French man, "No, Ella, clothes shop, no women." So it was like always one of those things that kind of got my back a little bit. And so, you know, I'd intended to go and do some study. Like I say, I dropped out before getting any exams at school, and I intended to do it at some point. But I was sort of singing, you know, would fold up after every year, and it kind of never did. And so then when lockdown happened, it seemed like a perfect time to do it because, you know, it would pay to tour.
But was this to sort of show your dad you could do it, or was this join your dad in his?
I think partly that. Partly I love printmaking. You know, I love prints. I love the idea. There's something about in my head about a print that makes something kind of final. And that's kind of something that we never feel really in music, is there? You know, there's always that feeling that there's something else you want to kind of uncover or something that you would have done slightly differently. And so there's never any kind of lines drawn. I think that's one of the things that kept me going for so many years, is never feeling like I'd quite got it right for me. You know, and lots of people assume that hits or selling lots of records, that's getting it right. And that's, you know, it's an irrelevance to me. It's not an irrelevance in terms of, you know, validation or getting money or any of that kind of stuff. That's all lovely. But it's not the same thing as feeling like you've made something that really, truly resonates with you.
But prints are all slightly imperfect, aren't they?
Well, they are imperfect, but they are imperfect. But it's kind of finished. If you know what I'm saying, yeah. You know, it's like that's the thing there that's kind of laid out with music. You know, we finish it when we do a recording, but then we're adjusting constantly live. You know, as you play a song through the years, you're finding the crux of it, aren't you? You're finding what the nub of it is that really hits you, and you sort of discard the extraneous stuff. You discard the stuff that ceases to be a part of your aesthetic, and so it morphs all the way through your life career.
Which brings us very nicely to this album, doesn't it? Because
I get to not talk about my dad, who's a printer.
Your dad's a printer too, isn't he?
I wanted to say that, because you did. He did.
And what?
But we will get there.
That's why I brought it up.
So he was a lithographic printer?
No, he was. I don't know what he was. He printed stuff in big machines.
So that could, you know, that's
Fleet Street, wasn't he?
No, well, he did do a bit in Fleet Street, but he was mostly just in a private firm. But I remember going down when I was very young in Islington to his factory. And just, it was underground, and the noise of the machines is phenomenal, right? Yeah. So this isn't art printing, you know, but this is so. And I remember him opening a locker and putting on this brown overall.
Yeah.
And this overall, in my mind, was like Superman putting on his cape.
Yeah.
It was an amazing moment where he transformed into this person who I was like aspired to, and I heard him swear. And never swore at home, of course.
Oh, God.
But then my dad got my brother into the printmaking industry when he was 16, Martin, right? So he left school with like 1 O-level in woodwork.
Like
Sorry,
me.
Mark.
No, that was me.
What?
No, listen. I left school 1 O-level, a bad one in French, and I was bilingual when I was born into a dual national family, so I've got nothing to commend me there.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
And my brother was a compositor. I mean,
Right,
a completely
yeah.
redundant thing now because
Yeah.
everyone does it on computers, but in those days it was picking up metal. And then he got to the stage about a year before we signed a record deal, and he said, "Dad, I've got to leave because my band is going to happen." And my dad wrote a letter to this guy saying, "My son has to leave because he's going to be a pop star." As if he's going to believe it, but yes, he did.
Oh,
You
fair
were
enough.
saying about your dad hearing your dad swear though, and I was sitting there, God, my dad was prolific, but he, as a Frenchman, and I was like, really, the air was blue, and my mum was completely the opposite. So she was like a kind of a grammar school girl, very really minded her manners, and we weren't even supposed to blaspheme and stuff, and I remember saying to her, it's like, well, why is it that Dad can swear? And she couldn't stop him because he was like a real patriarch. She just said, oh, it's different in French. And I thought, oh, okay. And then I remember being about 7 and my uncle in France had annoyed me about something, and I let loose with all this language with my father, and he went puce, It's like, oh, Mum, you lied to me. It's so not different in French, is it? They really don't like you going like this to your uncle when you're 7. Yeah, that doesn't go down. That doesn't go down well.
Guy, sorry.
No, but because you were making that lovely point about how, which is. So I even find over the length of a tour, when you start playing, you have a song, you have an arrangement, and by the end of the tour, it's completely different, and you haven't consciously changed anything.
No,
it just happens.
You're just sitting into it in a different way, aren't you? You're just feeling it in a different place.
I often have to think, especially on session work I do, because the whole thing is like, how quickly can you come up with something, and you just think, and you go home and you think, oh God, I could have done that, or I could have done that. And it's so the longer time you have with a piece is always better.
Yeah.
So we're now talking about, you've got songs here that you've been singing for years. So it's like now how it should have been, or how it should be now.
Well, yeah, how it should be now. Yeah, how because our language changes, and the things that we're prepared to say or we want to say when we're 20 aren't the same when we get older. And so for me, certainly as a singer who's become very lyric-centric, language has become really important. When we first started singing, we'd really sort of take on a lot of those American influences because that's what we were hearing, As I've gotten older, I've become more entrenched in my Europeanness and in my own Basildon accent. And so a lot of that language feels like such so much posturing, it seems really stupid. I'll kind of go from this like that, it's just like, what are you doing? That's a nonsense. And so and right down to words. So for example, Invisible from the first album is the only song I ever had that troubled the American charts in any which way, and I refused to do it. I haven't done it for like 35 years. So you go to America and it's like, it's the one song we know. It's like, what?
It's like, you can't relate to it.
I can't do it. I can't sing it. I don't spend dimes, and the whole idea about this man who's treating you appallingly and what can you scratch back from that? It's like, this is not a message I want to impart on anyone, It's like, that kind of victimhood, which I know is ridiculous because pop music's about so many different things, and and lyrics almost don't become important when we've engaged with something at a young age. And there's no shade on the song because it's a great song. It's just not my language anymore.
So you don't feel ever that you're playing characters in songs? They're always you.
Well, they're always something that I can relate to, or that there can still be misery and all that kind of stuff, but in such a way that I would express it, or I would imagine myself expressing it, Yes.
So it's like you feel a responsibility for
I do.
every song, which is...
and because when I'm playing live, I truly have to engage. It's like it's of no interest for me to go on and do a nostalgia thing. And again, there's no shade on anyone who wants to do that. But when I'm on stage and then you sort of glancing at the set list and thinking 3 more songs to go, that's like I think that's a real dishonour. Wow. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I think it's a dishonour. And so I only want to sing songs that I am going to inhabit on the stage. And that can incorporate plenty of hits. It's just not all of them.
Right. You mentioned earlier how you found your more European side, and just having a sort of looking at your work in the last couple of days and just having a really sharp overview of it all, you can see that journey from loving only American blues singers and Janis Joplin and that in your voice, and which was extraordinary in itself actually, funny enough, ironically, because back in those early 80s days, we were obsessed with Bowie's Berlin period. But you travelled into this area that, in a way, has embraced your dad's roots and is more chanson, right?
It is, yeah. And, is more kind of like influenced by the stylings of, I suppose, Jacques Brel. And, that's something that people have said to me, that there's more of a Bowie-esque style to my singing. And who doesn't know that Bowie was like, one of the greatest, musicians and writers and singers to have graced our stages. But I think that's more to do with the fact that actually, if you look at some of the influences that he had as a writer, he stemmed back from that kind of that chanson, that Brel style singing. So that's where the commonality, I think, happens.
Because in the new songs on the album, we'll talk about why you chose the old songs, but the 2 new songs that you got on there, Such Small Ale, has a Bowie feel.
Which is a great song.
Oh, thank you.
Really
I'm so pleased you like that. Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Incredible lyrics.
Thank you.
What I love about what you're doing is you don't, you take no quarter, you just say, these are the kind of lyrics I want to write. You are an art singer now, aren't you, really?
Bless your heart. Yes, I am. Well, it's what I aspire to. I mean, one of the things that I completely understand, and I say it with no rancour and no bitterness, is that you can't make other people see you the way that you want them to. You can't be looking for validation. Validation is not really something that you have beyond the zeitgeist, unless you're kind of completely entrenched in what's hip or the right people are liking you. And for someone like me, who went through kind of a mid-period of being, mainstream. I mean, I was thinking about this earlier. It's kind of funny with Yazoo. When Yazoo were going, I remember how the press turned. The press were very much like, Alison's brilliant, Vince is shite. Now people don't remember that now, because then it changed. Vince is brilliant, Alison is shite. And then you get on for a long enough time and they're both brilliant in their own kind of way, but then they're sort of like camps, because it's all to do with how much other people want to, are comfortable about owning you. And so many people feel fragile within their own position. They really feel they've got to cite the right names all the time. They've got to position themselves because, God forbid, someone else might not understand them, So anyway, so the point is I know full well that I can't change anyone's opinion of you. It's like people worry about their heritage, the legacy that they leave. And it's like, I know damn well it doesn't matter what I do, when I'm dead, they'll play the most pants record I've ever put out because that's what they'll do. You can't change that.
But I think, because the arts in general is with all of its pretensions of being very liberal, and it obviously is politically quite often, but it's so slow at change, and you get dumped with baggage early on, and people won't change their minds about you. They won't change it, no. That's who you are.
Although you say that, but there's a weird thing that happens with perspective, which is that the stuff that because like what you were saying with that perception about how, because when you're young, the young part of your career, everything is about right now, and all that matters is what are people saying today? What am I doing today?
Yeah.
What is that's happening today? And then it's when you get some time on it, you get some context, then you do find that it's actually different things that rise to the surface, not necessarily.
And also for different people, your audience isn't a monolith, and they come to you at different stages, and so then we can go out assuming, oh, this is what you think of me, and then be completely surprised, But it's odd.
To use that print analogy again, because there's.
I think we should fill this with print analogies.
So for me,
I want what's the most mezzo tint track? No.
That's the most technical.
It's just you've reframed all these songs in a similar frame. So you've taken like the synth as being, you've said.
Well, the reason why I quite like working with synthesizers live is first of all, it's like I'm not a big A-list act. I don't have the kind of money to be able to have all of the things that are going to make a live experience completely safe and comfortable on stage. You're going to be losing crew. So it's about trying to hone a sound that is going to travel safely. So I might go into a hall that's got really great acoustics. I might go into somewhere where it's just everything's coming off the back wall, and you're really struggling. What I find about myself as a singer is, as you can hear, I say I talk in bassoon. It's like I've got quite a woody voice. It's
Contralto.
Well, it's quite fibrous. Right. So there's a lot of fibre to my singing, and often if I'm out with a band where all the harmonics are kind of taken up, as they are, because the first thing I did before I was training to be a piano tuner, which will be interesting. So I can hear this kind of stuff.
Wow.
So all these, it's all that kind of space is kind of taken up. So the shape, the kind of like the shape of your bacteria is it's lost. It's lost within that. So it's only this kind of middle that's coming through. Or else it's just a swamp of bass. And what I've found quite useful about working with electronica is, and I've used this analogy before, it kind of creates like a formica table. So if you think of me as dropped water, you see the shape of my puddle more easily in a scenario where I'm not equipped to be able to really control that sound.
Is it because the arrangements, which I love, are quite modest? On this album.
Well, it was very much an idea, because for me it's about live. Live is where I am at my most comfortable. Again, in the studio, it can be problematic. It can be problematic because I'm quite a dynamic singer, and in order for them to kind of catch that, you end up things being so compressed that you actually lose sense of this, of the volume to small, and I've completely forgotten what we were talking about.
Well, were you in? Okay, so when you and I can't really remember either, but I've got something that sort of carries on. I think maybe a bit when you and I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, so keeping the so that was very much about finding arrangements that would be able to translate to the stage.
That's the other thing. I was going to ask is because you and Sean, your producer, if there was a sort of conscious thing of sitting down and thinking of a palette that's going to work with 40 years worth of sounds.
And certainly for somebody that's been a solo singer, albeit a reluctant one, it's not like I ever had the ambition to go solo. It's just, what fate's allowed. And but then kind of in the whole growth, because it's like my education in music's happened on a prominent stage, it's like it happened very quickly, and so all of the learning I've done has been quite exposed. So the aesthetics sort of change quite dynamically, as they do anyway through time, and again going back to the kind of zeitgeist and what other producers are using. But I'm much more reliant on a producer to bring that sound to the table. So you can end up looking at a 40-year catalogue that becomes really schismatic. It really is. And were I the kind of person that wanted to present everything just as it was, it would just be the nastiest karaoke. Do you know what I mean? It really would be just a...
But also, I think, because you're more tuned to your lyric side.
Yeah.
This particular palette on this album
exactly.
leaves you more naked
it
and
does,
the
yes.
lyrics more exposed. If you were just against the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, it would all be about the voice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing for me, because it's like within singing, being so adherent to the lyrics, that we know when it comes to emotion's not always hyperbole, and kind of the dramatics and the screaming. You don't have every kind of upset just by, this is not happening all the time, Sometimes it becomes about still and quiet and being removed and being,
Well, which is the European way.
Yeah, I guess that is what it is, and angry and ugly and all these different things that you can be in European music, and so it gives the space to allow that to happen. And so, with me, being a singer is not at all about the acrobatics. It's not about the acrobatics and the showboating and the volume. And so that's why that kind of space allows for.
I was just looking for the title of the other new song on the album. Is it Impervious?
Impervious
Me.
Or was it The Impervious Me?
The Impervious Me.
And you're telling us something in
well,
there, aren't you?
I think in lots of ways I am. It's like, how do you navigate this? How do you navigate this world? You can't, like I said, you can't make people see you the way you want them to see you. You can't make people behave in such a way that's going to validate you or make you feel comfortable, you are going to be shocked. And, I am always shocked by people who hurt other people. I find that
But of course, if
shocking.
you're living, if you're on social media and I've just had a record come out, and you're so proud of it and the track comes out, you can't help but look to see what people have said. And then people say, much better if Tony Adley had sung it. For God's sake, it's not his song, it's mine. But that's hard to be impervious, isn't it?
Well, it not in the end. And I think maybe it started for me earlier than you, because it was like, I was always, I was always other, in the sense I never fit in well. I found it difficult to socialise. I found it difficult to talk. I was strange for Alf. I mean, all these kind of things that you can, that you're just a target for that kind of stuff. So, and it was a bit like that before I even became famous. I always was peculiar. And there was a big element of rejection in there. And, and I say that with no sadness, but it's like when you have had year upon year, more of that than the other, you just do learn. You do learn to do that. And it goes back to what we were saying about printing and kind of lyrics, why lyrics are so important to me, because I am such a chaotic person, that I am spinning with ideas and don't always have the wherewithal to be able to make those manifest, but there's just so much going on that I'm in a state of panic that I need to kind of gather things together. I need to kind of put them into a place where I can look at them, and that's what lyric writing does for me. It gathers in all these things and puts them in one place where I can see them, and I suppose that's what it is with the print. The print is that it's been put into a frame, it's been put into a grid, and I feel comforted by grids.
Do you think, because the lyric thing, because I was saying before to Gary as an analogy, this album feels it's like you're a curator of your own exhibition.
Yeah.
But do you think that because of the way you look at your lyrics, that the exhibition that you've curated comprises of stuff that relates to where you are now? That, like, if you've done it a couple of years ago or in a couple of years' time, it might be slightly different.
It's a hard one, and like yourselves, you've got a big, large catalogue. So whereas this album is called Key, it's by no means all of my favourites. For example, the latter albums, I feel very happy about how they are aesthetically, and they've most recently been done. I don't need to reinvestigate those things because they're already stage friendly for me.
The two Sigsworth albums.
The two Sigsworth. Oh yeah, thank you. And I loved working with him, but I didn't need to kind of, there were a couple of songs visited just because I couldn't exclude them, and I want them to be remembered.
And the other feels like it's a song that also the actual song. It feels like it's a song like Impervious Me. It's you admitting so much about
I have no
your troubles.
Yeah, well, it's even funny enough. It's not even about troubles, because I'm kind of quite unemotional about it. It's like it really is like I say, it's like standing outside of yourself and looking at it, gathering yourself together and seeing, okay, where are we at? All of those things that would have inspired those things would have been painful when they happened. But I don't. It's weird. I don't really carry that stuff. So you remember something hurt. You can see a scar, but you can't engage with the pain anymore.
Do you think if you, there must be people out there that felt that you represented them on a bigger stage because of all those things you just said?
Yeah, I think so.
Where
and
pop
also,
music doesn't normally. It just gives you something to aspire to, and of course you can't.
Yeah, no, there is that. But also within that, I don't want to paint myself as being this kind of like this poor innocent that, that sort of like just had to, I was also an arsehole. Do you know what I mean? That this is a part of your learning, and it's within shame of being an arsehole. Within, like I say about me, I hate the fact, I hate seeing people hurt each other. More than anything, it's what depresses me, it's the desire. It's not even so, there's very few things you can say to me that would actually offend me. There's not many words that you could say that would go, oh, I didn't know this. It's much more, the sadness would be like, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do that to another human being? That's the thing that crushes me. It's the intent. And again, I've forgotten what we were talking about. About being an arsehole.
People that where you've been a voice for them in being the other.
I think there's and I think there's some comfort in that. I suppose in the same way that I was kind of comforted. I was a big Elvis Costello fan as a kid, and what appealed to me within his writing was he expressed this anger that hitherto I'd only really seen in French music, in English music. I mean, I know there was obviously punk, but sometimes, that the lyricism within that was a little bit, arsehole, fuck. And it's just like, it's like, and I grew up with that. So none of that was kind of groundbreaking.
Not quite
to
the
me,
nuance you were looking for.
Yeah, it just didn't sort of like bring anything new to the palette. Whereas I suppose with Elvis Costello on a young head, hearing that kind of anger put together in this kind of like,
it was literally our last
lyricism.
guest.
Oh, was he? Was he just here? So, so that worked in that way for me, and I think it helps some people. For someone like me who's not, I have no shame in my failings. I recognise them. I want to fix a lot of them, but I don't feel shame for having them.
But you're very open about everything. I mean, the fact that because what's quite nice is that I guess we're saying this is how facets change, is that the stuff that you didn't like when you were younger, a lot of that works for you now. The fact of you didn't engage with the pop
well, a
stuff
lot of it was to do with
which now is a great thing to be
Yeah.
able to say.
It is, but it's also it was about the experience, I think, and it's what you were saying earlier when you're talking about when we first start out. You're in the minute, you're living in the time. So, Yazoo was a good fit for me because we weren't talking. We never sat down and discussed what are we going to do, what we're going to make, what kind of record we're going to make, what do you do, what do I do? It was just like a very innocent whiteboard where we just put ourselves on it and without editing one another, really, and so there was a kind of a real freshness to that, it was experimental in the sense that I had no idea what I was doing, I was just doing it.
How did it start? How did you meet?
So we both come from Basden.
Right.
So I was at school in the same form class as Martin and Andy from Depeche, and also, funny enough, Perry Beaumonti, who is playing back with the Cure again now. So we were all the classmates, and in the old days. When you went to the state schools, they had this like Saturday morning music school. I don't know if you ever had them up where you were. The council put on. So in one of the secondary schools, they would like have a morning of music classes. So you could sign up, and it was like free. So where you got an instrument, you got instrument tuition. They would have choirs. They would have a theory class. And it was all this. So you go to Saturday morning music school if you did well enough. And I was superior in the recorder.
Excelled.
I excelled at the recorder.
The dribbling on the floor, right?
I loved recorders, and so as one of the two better recorder players, our teacher, set up a little audition for us, and we got in. So it was at this Saturday morning school that I very first saw Vince with his two brothers. I think they're all violin players, and like these three blonde boys that looked like
they're very
little
Christian.
ducks. I don't know what he was at that stage, but he certainly was. Him and Fletcher, and I think Martin as well, became very heavily involved in the local Christian group. Yeah,
but he didn't. You had no connection then.
Oh yeah,
until
so
later
no,
on.
so no, he was the one that I knew least. He went to Langdon High Road. We were at Nicholas Comprehensive, and they were the two schools that meet in the shopping centre for fights. So now when I first started playing, I was 16 when I started playing in a punk band, and the story goes, and so I'm retelling someone else telling it rather than me remembering it, is that I'd gone up to this boy at school who was a year younger than us going, "You play guitar, you're playing in our band." Like that, that's how the story goes. And he was Robert Allen, whose stage name was Robert Marler, who was Vince Clarke's best mate.
Right.
So we played in the punk band. Vince had seen me. I was the first out of all of our kind of cohort to play in bands. Vince, when he split up from Depeche, needed a singer to sing a song. At that time, I don't know how outgoing he was, but he knew of Big Alf from Basden, got my phone number, gave me a phone call, come and sing on a demo. And to my mind, it was like, these are in the days we didn't even have cassette players. We had nothing.
Well, this is when we were on the same circuit, I believe.
That's right, we were.
He says you were a fan of his band.
Yes, and so, I think we supported you once, actually.
Oh, I hate that it's true.
We're at the Takeoff 6 or something like that.
He's a face for us, absolutely.
It's
and certainly in the hierarchy of our, local bands done good, So anyway, he asked me to sing this demo, and in my head it was like, I was I'd gone from singing in punk to playing in these blues bands that were supporting Dr. Feelgood. And
So how did you find out you had this voice? What was was there a moment you realised?
This was kind of being in punk, and that was much more to do with the fact that I had the front. Do you know what I mean? I had the front, and I was really good at shouting.
Did you like people that no one else liked? I mean,
no. This is the other thing. I didn't really know anyone. It's like we lived in Basden, so it wasn't like we weren't going to these kind of clubs where the hit bands were happening. It's just that this sort of stuff seeped through into the suburbs and into the
blues.
sort of like. The blues. There's that in Southend and Canvey. There was quite a big thing. It's like
of course, yeah, Canvey Island.
And so when I
the
kind
English
of like,
Mississippi Delta.
Exactly, that's it. And so I'd started playing with some musicians that I'd kind of met who were kind of Canvey based, and through that we kind of got into with the Dr. Feelgood lot, and so I was very much of that kind of cohort. That's where I was hanging with those. It was down and dirty in the pubs, And so anyway, when Vince had come along and been a part of Depeche, and, on one side for me, it was like, Depeche, that's amazing, On the other side, it was like all these geezers who'd suddenly started wearing frills and stuff like that, which for me was just like, I thought we were anti-fashion. I thought we didn't care about these things. It was like for a young.
Because you wrote a song about that, didn't you? About the 70s.
Yeah, it's just being a, and I thought I'd found my place because I was always kind of big and I was rough and I was rude and I didn't grow up in a family. I grew up in a real kind of French peasant family that
Did you smoke chitons?
I didn't know, but I was all kind of rough, and so I'd never had a doll. I didn't have dresses. I didn't know how to do the girl thing, and so when I kind of found this movement, I've really, this kind of like androgynous, gender confused movement. I really liked that. I felt really comfortable, and so when I saw my friends kind of moving away from that, it was like kind of believing. I believed that was a real thing. I didn't see it as a fashion,
Did you used to go to Crocs?
I played Crocs. I supported the Damned at Crocs.
Because I went to see. I went to Crocs, didn't I?
I went to Crocs. Determined to get Crocs.
Did you?
He was determined to get.
I remember we'd had our first single come out, and we drove down en masse with Steve Strange and Robert Elms and our whole little scene, because we had Rusty Egan had said we've got to see One Night in Crocs because we've got to go support everybody who's in this movement.
Yeah.
And we went there, and it was Depeche Mode, who hadn't been signed, obviously, supporting Soft Cell, who hadn't been signed.
Oh, really?
And I remember Steve-O was in the room. And
so it's quite a happening night.
it was a happening night.
Do you remember seeing the Crocs, though?
The Crocs?
They actually had crocodiles in there.
No.
They actually had crocodiles at one point. It was really strange. It was like kind of one of those French pissoirs, where they just sort of have the trough, and you think, where are you going? And there was like this kind of thing around the corner in the dark. They had a couple of crocodiles in there. They literally had crocodiles in a bit of a trough. It was fucking
now it
weird.
would be shoes.
The health and safety on that.
Yeah, but that's the glory of those days, wasn't it? There was no,
times, yeah.
Well, we could just take our shitty old gear anywhere, couldn't we? It's like even at college, you couldn't even take in my Dremel without having it checked over. In those days, it's like, God, we were just walking fire hazards.
So how did the writing work with you and Vince?
Vince go, got any songs? I go, yeah. Got a song. And that was it. That's how we did it. Or there he'd do, or he'd, sing a song on a guitar. And it's funny, because in those days I had such a brilliant musical memory. And I mourn that, because it's like I remember him singing there in the studio one song to me. He sang it twice, and then he didn't want to do it. I can remember that song word for word. And then playing it twice to me. But, forget it now.
Because it happened so fast for you, didn't it? I mean, a bit like us. Our first single was a hit, and your first single was
it was bonkers.
Enormous hit.
It was bonkers quick. It was like, so I was saying, he'd asked me to do this demo. And for my head, it was like, this isn't the area that I wanted to move into. But I would then have a demo to be able to play someone of me singing, to find, to get together with another band. That was what my thought was. I didn't expect what was going to then happen, which was he called me up and said he played it to the record company, and they said that we should record it as a single, or we should record it. So it's like, great, because I've not really been in a proper studio before,
Where had you done the demo? You've done it
we did it on his like little
okay.
4-track, a port studio in his flat in Vange. And so this is the first time I've gone to a studio, and it's like in down hours at the old Blackwing. I don't know if you ever went to Blackwing. So it was in like Southwark, sort of south.
This is Eric.
This is Eric's place. Yeah, which was like just a kind of like a big, dark, cold live room and a little. And you're talking about smoking your tin, because Vince used to really chain smoke in those days, and that actually did get me smoking, because we'd be in this tiny little room like that, where he's like that, and it was like the only way you could cope with it is to start smoking yourself.
New Romantics did smoke a lot.
There were so many failures all over.
Well, you needed to be wreathed in smoke, didn't you?
Right,
or nothing would work.
Backlit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we did the single, and then he said, we've got to do a B-side, and obviously Vince had written Only You. He'd had it when he'd left Depeche already, and then he wrote a B-side which was Don't Go, and we went into the studio to record Don't Go for the B-side, and I think Daniel had come at that point and said, you can't, that's the single, you can't use it as a B-side, you're going to have to do another B-side. So it's like, so that's when we wrote Situation together, which was then that was like the third song. And so Situation, we put the Situation on the B-side. And of course, when that went to America, the Americans swapped it and released Situation as the single and had.
You couldn't write a bad song, really, could you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, again, it's contextual, because I can listen to things in there and think, yeah, there's definitely bad songs in there. I mean, those aren't 3 of them, but there's definitely bad. I wouldn't actually, not bad songs is not the right word, but there's undercrafted songs, but the joy of them is the kind of the innocent freshness, and that was all because there's no A&R. And fuck me, A&R is the death knell, isn't it? Because suddenly you can have this kind of you have an idea, and people love it because it's come from a really kind of offbeat place.
I feel at the beginning of the 80s was that A&R just stood back. Went, whoa, hang on, there's so many ideas coming through.
They were just signing it in. They were signing these bands that were playing, had already got their material together. They were bringing it in, and it's always the second album that became a problem. When you became successful and people want to tie themselves to you,
But you talked about your otherness and that feeling of slight insecurity that you have sometimes. And how was it suddenly for you going on Top of the Pops and suddenly doing smash hits and all what you had to do?
I was disarmed because I didn't read that kind of stuff, and that was another problem with me, which takes us back to the kind of the early. Oh, it's such a thread of stories, but I was disarmed. What I did know with Top of the Pops is it was like the show, wasn't it? When we were kids, it was like the one thing, and I loved what I did love about Top of the Pops.
That was job done. That was job done, wasn't it?
What is it? If you got Top of the Pops, you had a hit. Wasn't it? But, I remember someone saying to me at the beginning, how do you have it? It's easy. What you do is you record a song and then you give it to a plugger, and the plugger takes the radio station. All the radio stations play it, and then everyone buys it. And that's how it goes. Because that was my experience of it. I didn't, you don't realise at that stage how lucky you've been or how, or how you've fallen on something. But,
you should try it.
Yeah, you should try it. It's really, just record a song, give it to a plugger, and then they'll A-list you. That's what happens.
But you were learning on your feet.
I was completely learning on my feet. Yeah, so to go on these TV shows, so to do Top of the Pops, there was, you have an idea of what it was. As the truth of it is you have to be there at 8:00 in the morning. You're stuck in this room and you weren't allowed to leave. And you weren't cleared till 8:00 at night when you were taken out for a couple of minutes to go on stage to do your practice. So that was kind of quite shocking at how dull pop music is, how dull it is, and it's, I can't remember who said something about, it's, I think it's someone from the Rolling Stones.
Charlie Watts.
Was it? What did he say?
It was after 25 years. So how was it? It's like, 5 years playing, 20 years hanging around.
That's exactly what it is, yeah. So anyway, thrilling to get on Top of the Pops, but it occurred to us as we were walking up, because the thing is, Vince and I never made a relationship. I said I found it really hard to talk to people, and I don't think at that stage he was any more gregarious than I was, so we just couldn't get a conversation going. It's a bit like that, right? It's a bit like that. So then I went out on stage at Top of the Pops, and as I stood on stage, it occurred to me, shit, we've never talked about how we're going to present. Do you know what I mean? We haven't talked about how we're going to do this, and it was like, you know, I'd never been on stage with it before, and so they roll the cameras, and I remember the very first time I recorded it, I was really embarrassed. I was at the back of stage going to, and I didn't hear the music starting, and so I'd like missed the first line for the lip syncing. And they left it in there. It's like, the lip syncing, and then it's like, what do I do with my feet? Oh, I'll do this. So there's no kind of like me coming out here thinking, yeah, this is how I'm going to present, and this is who I am. It's just like, making up as I go along. Is this a dance? I don't know. I don't go to discos, you know.
And then dreading to watch it on Thursday night.
Oh, I do. I mean, I don't listen.
The great one is looking at your monitor. I remember getting caught looking at your, when you see you're just doing that.
I mean, Vince was a bit like the Eric Clapton of New Romantics, wasn't he? He was forever leaving bands when they were successful. But in a way, it was a godsend for you because you got to begin your solo career.
Kind of, except for I could have done with more time, riding pillion than sort of like, it's almost like I felt like I got too big a platform too quickly. And Yazoo was a really good learning curve. And I think, we've both had a lot to bring to the table with one another. Had we been able to establish a relationship?
Yeah, you're very honest about what happened, aren't you?
Well, yeah, because I am this person now because it's through years of learning and accepting your own culpability and recognizing the flaws that we all have and being really chill about it. At the end of the day, that's not who I was then. Who I was then was this angry, antisocial, difficult, neurotic. Do you know what I mean? A fighter. I'd grown up in a fighting family, and there was never a day where someone wasn't crying. There was so it was a lot of aggression, but strangely, I never read any of that as anger. Because that's what it was like. That's what it was like.
Have you seen
like
French
this.
cinema? I mean,
and that's what it was like. So, I would, and I was socialised like that because my family, again, were kind of quite antisocial. Other than my dad's rugby playing mates, that we would, all our holidays were in France with the cousins because that's the only time my dad could see his family. So, and we didn't have, I never saw my mother with a friend. Do you know what I mean? There was none of that kind of happened in the house. So, I hadn't really learnt those skills, and my socialisation was all this kind of passionate arguing, and I loved it. I did love it, and I thought it was completely normal. But you take that to an English person, someone like Vince, when you see with a lot of English people, they are kind of very, or they certainly were then
internal.
kind of controlled. It was all internal.
If you're arguing, everything's gone wrong. It's not
exactly, and all the rage is happening inside. And the good thing about my family, there's no, there's no kind of everything's said, everything's on the table, so there's no hidden agenda, And so I was really confused by hidden agendas. And so then when you're going to someone and losing your rag over something simple, and they're just saying you're a fucking arsehole, which is fair enough. I get that, but at the time, it was like I just didn't know how to communicate other than in this way, and he would have found that appalling.
Now, I knew you were going to make that album because it's starting to affect stuff we were doing in Spandau Ballet. Because with Alf, I'm talking about, because Tony Swain and Steve Jolly had produced the True album, and obviously it had been really successful. So I'd written what was going to be the next album, Parade, and we were trying to organise when to record it, and we had to record it because we were going on tour at this particular time.
Yeah.
And Tony said, but we can't do it because we're going to do Alison Moyet's album. And it became this kind of, I remember we were pulling them to come to us and can we get you in the studio now and do it? And
listen, fair dues, but for me, the memory
so you're
of
going to have this out then? You're going to have this
No.
Really?
Shall I tell you why? Shall I tell you why? Actually, the reason why I wouldn't have this out is because at that time I was talking about when I was not au fait, actually Spandau in one interview were the one band that said something really kind about me, and I never forgot that. You probably don't remember it, but it was like a real kind thing when it was easy not to be kind. And so that sat with me all the time. So it's like, yeah, never a bad word. Do you know what I mean? So that was lovely. But no, in that occasion, we were doing a lot of kind of downtime. So they were really cramming us in to the point where we'd only got 9 songs finished in the time that we did, which is when the record company had it away. Yeah. So yeah, we were,
I think he played Love Resurrection to us. I think you did that in advance of the album because I've got a feeling he played that to us while we were working.
Oh,
Tony
maybe. But I
and-
mean, this.
and
But you know,
Steve.
back to A&R men, though, wasn't it? Because what that would have been about was when I'd got assigned to CBS, and they're saying, "All right, what producer should we go with?" The way they A&R'd is to open Music Week and say who's got the #1 album, and it was like it was all going off for you. That's why they had a big Swan
Bananarama,
Jolly,
probably.
you and Bananarama, which is why they chose Swan Jolly for me. Is exactly that. And so then they would have been in that position.
But I have
It's
to
like
say,
everyone wants them.
they did. Obviously, they didn't write for us, but they wrote. And I think Tony's a lovely man.
Oh yeah, he is lovely. Yeah, yeah.
And your relation, and suddenly you were part of the writing every day, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, because yeah, of course, we wrote all the stuff together. What tended to happen is that I would write the lyrics and some melody, or that would go to Steve. Steve would sort of like then do his thing that when he'd sit down with me, you know, and he'd go, which is a huge one. He'd go. That would be the thing that he did, and it's like I'd have to kind of read into. Oh, you okay? You wanted some kind of like up top
Acrobatics.
embellishment there. You want me to go? And the other thing is that they, you know, love to record me slightly out of my key because they always wanted that, you know, which is kind of great for the studio, but you can't do that live.
No.
You can't spend the time live. But anyway, yes. So we wrote together, and then Tony would arrange it.
Because it is, and you know, the pair of you have got from them. I mean, you know, in context now, absolutely definitive 80s albums. I mean, it's not, you know, you've moved on. I mean, it's nice that you're not trapped to that. Yeah. But it's true. But if you know, for history classes, describe the 80s. That.
I know.
You know what I mean? It's like-
Lamont, and we must mention, because I know our time is short with you, because I think you've got other things you have to go to. Yeah.
Oh,
it's
your
the
studio,
studio.
your studio.
It's us then.
Oh yeah, sorry. No,
but-
see what I was doing. I go like that. Sorry.
Lamont Dozier.
Yes.
To
Yes.
work with him. Just tell that story.
Well, that goes to the unfortunate thing about Invisible, which I
Right,
won't
yeah.
sing.
Yeah.
But like I say, there's no shade in the song. It's a great song. But what was remarkable about him was what a gentleman, so sweet, and that sounds asinine. It's
Is
not
this in
that.
LA? You went to
Yeah, no, he was in London. I seem to remember being in London, and they'd set up a meeting because I think he was looking to write for people at that time, and set up a meeting with him. And so I just went in there and met him, and I think he was showing me some songs he'd written to see, you know, down what line I was looking at, or maybe he was plugging them to me. I don't know, but either way, I'd heard Invisible and could hear straight away that was a song that would suit my kind of vocal palette, you know. But he was just, you know, it's kind of a funny thing. You'll have seen it yourself, like when we did Top of the Pops and stuff like that. You come across these kind of big old greats who are really chill, really sound people, and then the kind of like the newbies who tended to be sort of really full of themselves, you know. And so you'd have expected someone like Lamont Dozier, who is an American, and Americans are very comfortable bigging themselves up, aren't they? They're not. They don't have that English.
Europe, no Europe.
Yeah.
No Europe.
They don't get modesty, you know, and
Or self-effacement.
They don't self-effacement. That's the word I'm looking for. They don't get it, or that kind of irony of it, you know. So they're very comfortable in in their skin, and they're very comfortable talking about their successes. And so I would have expected someone like Lamont Dozier to be like that, but he was completely the opposite. Just really, really bass sound, gentle, quiet, and unflash.
Who did you want to be at that point?
Was
Is there an artist that you...
No, and that's why I think I got the problem. Why I ended up having the problem with Alf for such a long time. Because for me, and that's what was going with the other story. For me, what doing that album was, it was kind of like a continuation of kind of Yazoo, in the sense that we're going to try it like this now. I'm going to go into a different kind of a studio and a different setup. Well, what happens there then? You know, so I did that and said, okay, that was, you know, that's interesting. Now I go like that. It's like, no, what do you mean no? It's like, no, this is who you are now. And it was that shock, because I didn't really watch other people's careers. I didn't know that that's what happened, that you set your flag and then you were expected to ever circle it, you know.
I just, you know, obviously I'm really be interested to know how you got on with Dave Stewart and how that...
Yeah.
So that's when I was working, I was doing the Rain Dancing album with Gimme Iovine, and that was something that I'd started working with a new producer, and I think they kind of wanted to do that let's get you into America thing, which again, as a kind of a suck it and see, that's kind of interesting. Later on you realise actually that's not a great fit for me, just because I am so stubborn about these things here, you know, and work in a different kind of a way. However, I'd gone over to America and we were doing, I was on my own, doing this album in the A&M studios in La Brea, which was like,
Charlie
really,
Chaplin's old
yeah,
studio.
yeah. So it was a really kind of iconic. I loved being there. I really liked being there, albeit that I was on my own. And but actually, I won't go into all the darkness. So but anyway, within all of that, Jimmy had said, Jimmy's good mates with Dave Stewart, and said, he's kind of in town. Should bring him over. Come over, and maybe you can write together. And he sort of like just kind of rocked in, being perfect for me, because he was full of energy and bouncing, and it's like almost oblivious. It's like I didn't see my strangeness in his eyes. Do you know what I mean? And that's something, it's like I really read the room. I can really see it. I can really see it when people are going, freak. And that's straight away. No. and I was very sensitive to it then. So, so I was a bit wary of I'd always shame myself in social situations. But he turned up kind of oblivious and blind to me.
He's
but
very
not
glass half
blind to me.
full all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And just full of life and energy. And that really worked well for me, and he sort of got, he had no shame about anything.
But did you write in front of him? Did you just sing in front of him?
No, we just kind of went into a room, and he'd sort of like kind of gone like that and come up with kind of like a guitar thing and put it on the tape and sent me off with it. And that suits me, because that's what I like. I like writing on my own.
Every story you ever hear of Dave writing with someone, it is some sort of Tigger scenario.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And then suddenly there was this thing.
Yeah, just then he's come with this kind of like a chord structure and like that, and just put it down on tape, and I went back to my apartment and then wrote over it.
I'm gonna. Yeah, I might be completely wrong here, but I get the feeling that maybe you felt that you were losing a little bit of your own identity at some point during the making of those albums. I'd like to posit, I'd like to suggest that This House was a song that really, because I listen to that song now, and that joins up with you now so clearly.
Yeah,
I think it's on the Hoodoo album. And that's you finding exactly who you are as a writer.
And I was always going to be curtailed by my own lack of musical skills. Do you mean in terms of being I could never be completely autonomous because I wasn't an instrumentalist. And so I would get loads of ideas, but that wouldn't translate to my hands, So when I would write fast songs, that would be on a guitar because I could only play really bad power chords. When I wrote slow songs, it was always going to be on a piano because I was like that, So that's how it went. So had I ever sat down long enough to learn an instrument, it'd been great. But I think it was more a case of I didn't know my identity because I'd felt so long that my identity was not acceptable. Like I was saying about that kind of like that peasant aggression, it was so obvious that people found it really unappealing that you spend a lot of time really trying to cut your shape. So you're trying to cut your shape, you're trying to fit in, you're trying to read the room. It's like, what is other people doing? What is it other people are doing?
It worked with the NME, but not with smash hits. That's kind of
that kind of and then it didn't even work with the NME. Well, not really, because I would still go off and talk bollocks, and then get nervous and be inarticulate and all that kind of stuff, and then because I'd have the Essex accent and because I'd be talking too quickly, they couldn't really hear what I was saying, so they'd kind of put words into my mouth that would always make me sound profoundly thick, and I would say awkward, stupid things. I would just, and then go away and live with that, the intrusive thinking.
But I just really, I'm just saying how much I love This House as a.
Sorry. See, I'm so not. I never assume anyone listens.
A key is they use that word. Right?
Yeah, it was it would have been there because it was entirely my song, so there would have been no kind of compromise within that. I didn't write it with anybody, so that was a kind of a true moment. In the same way, I guess that, Winter Kills was, from the Yazoo time. There were always those kind of moments. It's just I wasn't prolific on my own.
So what was it when you did, because what's fun is when you do an album of covers, when you do voice, which is exquisitely arranged, by the way.
Anne Dudley
at
she's
the
amazing.
absolute top of her game on that one. So I'm wondering how was that?
Well, what that is. So I'm responding, yes, and I'm sorry if I am talking over you too much, and we're supposed to be a conversation rather than me talking.
No, we always do that.
Sorry. Welcome to our world.
Seen as a covers album, to me, it's not. to me, it's an album of classic song. And where I would how I would compare that to you is like as a bass player or as an instrumentalist, is if you hear someone playing Bach, you never say it's a covers album. It's someone playing Bach. Right. You know, and there's a profound difference. So I am singing songs not just by people who are singers, but people who write songs for singers. They're not singing them themselves. So they are writing classic song as in the way that, you know, a classical artist would write a classical piece of music for people to play. And that's, I think, one of the most important things I think about music.
That's a really good point. Although what's interesting is it's basically because of recorded music that we have this idea of classical music, because half the thing, Mozart or Bach would write a piece of music for this group of musicians to play in this room.
Yep, absolutely.
And so the
It's
idea,
an event.
Yeah. So it's only because of, you know, they didn't realise that 300 years time people would still be listening to it.
No, that's quite incredible, isn't it? Well, I've got no doubt that in 300 years' time, no one's going to be listening to me. And I've got, but I take no issue with that. I think that's really liberating.
I wouldn't say that, but
that's really not what I was trying to segue into.
No, but we have to, we do have to wrap up. But I wanted just to say about your this world tour you're doing, a world tour.
Yeah, it's really,
and how I love being on stage, but I hate being away from home, and that's always I like being with him.
Yeah, no,
I like being with
my
this is my other family, but there are moments when it's tricky, isn't it? How do you feel about it?
Well, I've done it quite, I've not done it every year. So the last time I did a big tour like that was like 7 years ago. So I kind of forget. I have no problems with solitude. That's all right. But I do, of course I miss the family, and I feel profound guilt about not being there.
Does your husband play drums with you?
He plays. He's a psychotherapist, but he does play drums. He played drums on this album, but he's got his own band going on.
He's a great
which
drummer.
is, he will be happy.
not bad psychotherapist.
My drumming's awful. Help me.
He's got a great band of his own going on, actually, which is called A Basic Thought, which is kind of much more kind of like progressive, kind of prog rock for the 21st century. It's interesting. I really love it, actually.
You wrote a song about cycling. One of my
passions. I did.
I can't believe that.
Oh, thank you. Do you know what's surprising me more than anything? It's like I say, I never expect musicians to listen to me. That's my kind of little thing in my head. Oh, musicians won't listen to me. So to have you quote some of my songs, it's like, wow, that's really flattering.
The whole thing it's about the Tour de France or something, isn't it?
It's about someone that's a long distance cyclist, and it's about, for me, putting myself in.
You, Gary.
Yeah, there's a novel actually about a long distance cyclist.
Yeah, well, it's about putting myself in their heads. Because it's like we talk about different skills, and it's like, my husband, he's one of these people that, he's really good at keeping fit. He's always done long distance cycling. He does yoga. He pushes his body. He's always pushed his body. Me, on the other hand, and he gets kind of like really, he always gets scared for me to go on stage because I never sing in between touring. So I don't do anything like that. It's got no idea what's going on. And then I might go 7 years I haven't singing, then I go out and I sing. And it's like, he's always thinking, what if this time it's just going to be a disaster? He worries for me. And I talk about how people like him who push their bodies, how that's a talent in itself. It's a talent to push yourself beyond that kind of pain. And then I also think about the trauma that happens in every human being. So going back to this song, it's the kind of, here's me thinking about someone that is pushing their body through this pain barrier and the things that they're kind of dealing with. And, even that they can go out on a ride after you've had a Barney or something like that, and they go out and thinking about what gets them through that next mile.
And that's on this album as well, isn't it?
I've forgotten it is. I have to check. See, I never listen to myself once I've done something, so it's like I forget. It is on this album.
What's it called?
It is called. Don't tell me, because I know All Signs of Life.
There you are.
All Signs of Life.
Thank you.